the very large C.
Yes.
Z?
C.
No, C.
That's
C
from
is
the in-laws.
C
Z?
as in commissioner or C as in Cal?
I don't know. What do I know? I'm just trying to get by, trying to figure this thing out. I try to figure out life.
Let me know when you figure it out.
Yeah, Cal, did you get my text?
About
Yes.
with the COVID?
Oh, what's that?
What's the text about?
Text.
Nothing, Cal.
I'm reading it right now. How long can you blow the shofar for?
I'm pretty good.
What's your
pretty
shofar?
good.
What's your Tikiyah Gedolahs like? What's that like?
I'll give you a private concert of it someday, and you could see. I'm a good 30 to 40 second person.
Let me explain what we're talking about. So Mary Lynn and Brian, you here?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so for Rosh Hashanah, one of the things that they blow is a shofar, which is like a ram's. What's that?
Oh, right.
Okay, so there's different things, Tikiyah, whatever. And the last one is called Tikiyah Gedolah, where the guy blows and he tries to hold it as long as possible. And then everyone's like, oh yeah, so did a great job,
Oh, wow.
like this. When I was a kid, this guy Herman Finch, this big fat guy I shouldn't say that. This big guy used to get up there and literally it'd go on forever. I was so amazed. He had the most amazing win. And so that's why, so you grade your shofar blowers by how long their Tikiyah Gedolahs are.
Ah, wow.
There's a lot of pressure on that, Terry.
I know, but I think I'm up to it.
Did people come up to you after this and that was like one of the best Tikiyah Gedolahs I've ever heard?
It is, because I add an extra twist to mine. Not only do I hold it a long time, but I also increase the intensity and volume as I go. So it raises the drama level of it.
Oh, so
Wow.
you take it to another level?
I definitely take it to another level.
Wow.
Huh.
I'm thoroughly intrigued.
Yeah.
All right, we gotta get a recording of of Terry's Tikiyah Gedolah.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. We could
Definitely.
open our finance committee meeting with that.
How are your Truahs? Are they good too?
Truah's okay. The tequila's okay. The tequila's okay.
All right, is Barney on, or are we waiting on Barney?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right, then let's get going. So, Barney, what do you think of the conversation about what Terry's doing on Rosh Hashanah?
I wasn't here for that, thank God.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's 4:02. So I'm gonna call to order. This is the Finance Committee meeting of the Park District of Highland Park. Is called to order on Thursday, September 17th at 4:02 p.m. Roxanne, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Here.
Commissioner Grossberg,
Here.
President Ruttenberg,
I'm here.
Okay, so we have a quorum present. So the next item on the agenda is public comment for items on the agenda. Executive Director Romes, has anyone from the public submitted any emails to be read aloud for public comments?
No.
Thank you, Director Romes. The next item on the agenda, I see we're not going to be approving any minutes. I assume at the next meeting, we'll have probably 2 meeting minutes to approve. So that's not on today's agenda. So the next item on the agenda is financial forecast. Director Peters to present.
Okay, does everyone see the updated financial forecast presentation on their screen?
Yes, I do.
We do.
Okay, let me get that into presentation mode. Okay, all right, so here we go. Our usual monthly updated financial forecast due to COVID-19. And we have our usual disclaimer from every month, so we'll go right past that and look at how our cash flow projections are looking. So you recall, included in our cash flow projections, of course, are actuals through August 31st, and then we have projected out the last 4 months of the year. And so at this point, we are projecting cash on hand at the end of the year to be roughly $11 million. Our original budgeted cash on hand was roughly $12 million. And we want to keep in mind that our reserve should be or is per board policy 25% of our general and recreation funds, otherwise known as our operating funds. And as we can see, that's about $4.7 million. And so our projected cash on hand at year end is more than double that amount. So we are looking good on that front.
Hey, I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me just take one small step back.
Okay.
How is this in any material manner different from the one we saw last week?
I would say not materially different. It's a couple $100,000 less.
Wait. I'm sorry. What is 100,000 less? Is it?
The projection cash on hand at year end, and that has to do with a couple of things. Our cash flows from property tax collections are coming in a little bit slower than what we projected them to be. And then also you'll see when we look at operations, our operating funds, that surplus is a little bit less than where it was reflected at July 31st.
Okay, and then my second question is, and I think we said this, but my memory fades from moment to moment. Does the cash on hand of 10,000,008 include the reserve of 4.6?
Yes, it is in there. Yes.
Okay, so what we're really saying is, so it's not 14 or 15, it's 10, it's 10.8. That's what I was trying to get to. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And keep in mind too, this is just the operating funds. So, debt service and capital, those are not in here either.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so here's our operations chart, which I think we're all used to too, but we'll always refresh ourselves. We have our green line, which is our original budgeted revenues of 21.4 million. And then our red line is our budgeted expenditures of about 18.6 million. So originally we budgeted a surplus of roughly $3 million at year end. Then when COVID hit, we went back and did our projections, which the green dotted line is our projected revenues at year end of 15.5 million. The red dotted line are our projected expenses at year end, which are 13.6 million. So our projections give us a surplus of roughly $1.9 million. And so the difference between our original budget and now our projections, the decrease in the surplus we were anticipating is roughly $1.2 million. We then went back in and show our actuals starting at May 31st of where we came in with our actual revenues for operations. It's $10 million at the end of August versus our projections of 9.22 million. And so the difference between our projected and our actual, we are coming in at roughly $843,000 higher than where we had projected. On the expense side of things, we can see our dashed line. Those are our actual expenses of 8.37 million versus our projected expenses at 8.66 million. So the difference between those is about $286,000 to the plus. We are trending still with actual expenses lower than our projections. And so our overall difference between where we had projected and where our actuals are at August 31st is a positive, a surplus of about $1.1 million. I'm going to ask you to keep that in mind again when we look at payroll expenses in a couple of minutes. So let's go to our next slide unless we have any questions on this slide. Okay, we'll move on to the recreation fund. So if you'll recall, in recreation, we have our red solid original budgeted expenditures of about $13 million. We have our original budget of revenues of about $10.5 million, which would show an operating deficit in the rec fund of about $2.4 million originally. Then when the COVID hit, we went and we redid our projections with the red dotted line for expenditures of about $8.8 million. And then our projected revenues in green at $5.8 million, with that showing a deficit of about $3.7 million. So the difference between our original budgeted deficit and our projected deficit grew by about $1.3 million based on the COVID. Then we went through and we've been charting our actual revenues on this dashed line, which are at about 4.35 million versus our projections of 3.52 million at the end of August. And so that shows that we're up by roughly $832,000 in our revenues. And then when we look at our expenses, we look at the dashed red line, which the actual is at 5.74 million, which is a little bit greater than our projections of 5.71 million, or for a net difference of about $25,000 more in actual expenses versus projected expenses. Overall, that gives us a net difference between actual and projections of about $800,000 at the end of August. And so while our expenses have come in a little bit more than where we thought they would be, that's largely due to payroll, which we're going to look at in a moment, but we want to focus on the overall number of being well over $800,000 better than projections here at REC. And as we showed on the previous slide, and which encompasses this, the $1.1 million surplus overall. And so let's look at payroll. We have our original green line, which was our budgeted payroll of $10 million. We went back when COVID hit and we came up with new projections of about $7.5 million in payroll. So that we were showing roughly $2.6 million of reduced payroll when COVID hit. And we got there by furloughing staff, by freezing salaries. We had a hiring freeze. Many measures were put into place to get to that number. We then in yellow posted our actual payroll numbers. And if you recall in July, we did exceed our projections with actual by about $150,000. And again, in August, we have exceeded our payroll projections. We're at 4.9 in actual versus our projections of 4.7 million. So the difference we're sitting at now is over projections of about $126,000. But, you know, this, while it may not look good, really to get the numbers we showed on the previous slides, the 1.1 million in surplus of actual over projections in the operating funds combined, and even then sitting over in the rec fund, having that surplus of $800,000, we could not get there. We could have not have offered the extra programs and services that we did without bringing back some payroll. I do also want to show you, and I can't remember if it was Cal or Barney asked us to break down the, each payroll that we've had for the year. And we have 3 payrolls in July. We will have 3 payrolls again in December, which are included in our projections. But it is important to note that really back once COVID hit in March, you can see that our payrolls did start coming down, right? Each payroll was less and less. And then in June, as we got a better grip on what services, what programs were really taking off, we did have to bring back some staff or hire staff or extend hours. We know we had to extend security at the beaches. So you do see those payroll numbers rising. But then you can see at the beginning of August, they are starting to come back down again. So, based on these trends too, hopefully we will see our projections and actuals, stay very close or even drop below, our actuals dropping below these projected numbers again, as time goes on now. And that's really,
yeah, my question was to have a display that would show us each month as opposed to the aggregate.
Okay, so we also have each month's totals across the bottom if that was what you're looking for.
Well, yeah, I'm in love with the graphing model. So
you want a graph that shows?
Yeah, I mean, it's just visually easy to look at it and say, where we are April versus or March versus October. And when you look at a graph, as opposed to looking at the numbers and going, okay, I see payroll 1, payroll,
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I see the numbers now, and I see
Okay.
that. Let's see, January, February, March, April, like May, we're at 441,
Right.
which is $100,000 less or $200,000 less if we go 2 months back. Okay, well, there's 3 payrolls, so we have to take out one of them, I suppose, and it comes out to $600,000. And you're saying that would be the expense, is that the expense to operate the extra security and just, what accounts for the $200,000 increase?
Oh, right, which would be extra staff. Security is not in payroll though. Security comes as an expense because that's, the actual security through the security firm.
Yeah,
But
I would say it's all of our rec programs that started, July was when we really hit phase 4. We opened our beaches. We did have our, not the security firm, but we did have the ambassadors. Our baseball started back up, our camps, our mini camps. So that's really what July is. July was when we really hit it hard with our programming.
So then I think to make a comparison of apples to apples, what we need would be a month-to-month overlay that would show payroll expenses and revenues on a non-cumulative basis. That's what I'm trying to get to, is a non-cumulative basis. So we get a snapshot and say, in July, we spent way more money than in May, but here's the reasons why, making it visually easy. I love the aggregate numbers and the graphing, but for purposes of drilling down and asking, well, why did we have this extra $200,000 expense? I think we need to have it done a different way. That's all I'm trying to suggest.
All right. Well, we will put something together then for next month. With payroll expenses versus revenues and some sort of a graph. And
That would be great. Thank you.
okay,
Maybe a bar graph.
a bar. Okay, we can try.
Well, because then we have like the expenses, go an inch high and it's in green on top of that. You know what I'm saying?
That makes sense.
Yeah, we will come up with something, Barney, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments or? things
I don't
for
have
next
any.
time?
Commissioner Grossberg, do you have any? Hearing none, let's move on.
Okay, then I am going to stop sharing and hand things over to Jeff.
Wait, before, Mary Lynn,
Oh, yes.
can I ask my usual question? If you had to summarize in one paragraph, what would you summarize the financial condition of the district? First of all, 2 paragraphs. One, what is the change since the last time we talked, and what are the future predictions? And where do you find us right now, currently, and projecting at the end of the year?
Okay, so
That's 3 paragraphs.
okay. Wow, with this great backdrop from Jeff too.
Yeah.
Okay, so our change since last time in operations, we were showing a surplus last time of about 1.5 million. That has dipped a little bit, our projections versus actual. And I'm going to say the largest reason for that is because property taxes are coming in slower. We did project them at a 94% collection rate for the year, but it is a little hard to project where or when those monies are coming through. And so I think I still feel good about our 94% projection rate for taxes, but they are coming in slower than originally planned. So that is one difference from last time, but I can tell you, and you'll see in your memo from Brian this week, we did just receive $2.3 million in taxes today. So that is wonderful. With about 1.8 million of that going to the operating fund. So you'll see that coming. So currently, I think we're good. I think we're showing, I think the differences that we're seeing are timing differences. And again, largely in taxes, because that makes up so much of our revenue, especially this year during a COVID year. And then finally, I feel good about our projections. It seems things are holding. I just got a report that our, coronavirus numbers are going down in Illinois. So hopefully we will stay in phase 4. Hopefully people will be coming back. I know we're making some changes over at the rec center. So hopefully that will open up and, more people will be coming in there. And so overall, I guess my summary of my 3 paragraphs is I think I still feel very positive about where we are and fortunate with all the things we have implemented, and that we're just, our bottom line is looking good, and I project it to continue to, stay the course.
So I think it'd be actually very, very helpful that when you make these presentations in the future, you
Mhm.
have like one slide, basically what your conclusions are, similar to what I just asked, 2 paragraphs, not a lot. It's like almost like a footnote on a financial statement.
Okay,
So at least, so we can track that because, we're not, I'm not as number guy or something like that. And so at least we have what the bottom line is, what your conclusions are. And
Okay.
so we can still track based on your conclusions also.
okay, all right, will do.
All right. So anybody else? Barney, anything?
No, I'm following along and looking at the beach and saying, remember the days of summer when we had sand and this beautiful beach?
Okay, that's a good segue to Director Smith.
Come on, give me credit. That was a good segue. I agree.
I just
Yeah.
said that.
It
It's a
was
good
good.
segue.
Yeah, but nobody else is jumping on and saying, yes, Cal, you're right.
Yeah. First of all, I never hear "yes, Cal, you're right." So that's something that's not. It's not in anyone's vocabulary. So
I think you're both right. And
okay.
we're excited
thank
to
you very
get the
much.
next
So-
presentation.
I'm going to start by giving a brief update on Rosewood Beach. So the photo here, this was taken at the beginning of the week. So we did have some pretty big storms last week. So I want to provide an update on what the beach looks like right now. This is obviously the swimming beach, which we feel, and Smith Group feels as well, is performing very well. I know we've talked about potentially putting a revetment in this area. However, at this time, it's likely that we would recommend that we would not need to do that. As you can see, the nourishment we did last year is really protecting the beach as hoped. Now, this is the interpretive cove. And you can see the Chase Lounge and that boardwalk area continue to be an issue. And we predict they will continue to be an issue throughout the time that the lake levels are high. And you can see in the background there's a child and then an adult pulling them up. It gives you kind of a perspective of the steep slope we have right there.
He is safe, just so everyone knows. He's okay.
Oh yeah, well, it's all cushy sand, so he's fine.
Yeah, and he's a 7-foot tall basketball player, so.
Here's another shot just from another angle to give you a feel. Now, you can see here the sand has moved back quite a bit. So I have another photo here. So on the left side, there's the lake, and that's where the Chase is. This just gives a perspective of how much distance there still is to the parking lot. And you have all the sand through here. And then the parking lot, which starts right at the edge of the boardwalk. And then lastly, here's one more overview to see. So we did share these photos with Smith Group, and Margaret still feels that we have adequate protection for the fall and winter months. However, if we did want to do something short term, there are still some options out there. So my last slide here just goes through some of the, I'm going to briefly talk about some of these options. So the short-term option would involve placement of trap bags in some manner, most likely in front of the bench area, possibly in front of the interpretive center. However, it looks like that's less necessary. Plus, in working with Smith Group, it sounds like that may be a challenge, as you saw in the previous photo. Around the interpretive center, the slope is very, very steep. And the concern is that those bags would quickly be undermined by the lake, because all of those bags would be receiving the force of the waves. So it's likely that we may want to put them in front of the bench area. But once again, Smith Group feels that it may not be absolutely necessary at this time. And they are looking more into the permitting for this and trying to help us to develop a timeline. As you can see here, we're estimating this cost could be around $50,000. And we're saying right now construction potentially could occur late fall. For this option and the other two that I'm going to touch on, we're hoping to have more information so that we can provide more detail at the Tuesday board meeting. Now, medium term, in meeting with Smith Group, we have discussed a somewhat of a new option. It would be a little bit more like the long-term option, which was the sheet pile wall that ran along the parking lot. But this would be potentially using trap bags as that wall, and they would be buried and then they would be covered by sand. So this is something else that we're working with Smith Group on. They are currently working on an estimate. They're going to be getting us some drawings soon. We are thinking, based on what we learned about permitting, that it's very possible we could do this work in winter. Now, weather would be a major factor. If the weather cooperates, we could possibly start it in December or January. And once again, we're hoping to get more information on that soon. And then lastly, as we talked about before, as a long-term option, the $600,000 figure here is the estimate for the revetment just in the interpretive cove. And this would be a project that we would do in the spring if we move forward with it. Any questions about the revetment? All right, then I want to provide a really brief update.
Wait, I have, Barney, do you have any questions?
No, I'm considering the, if the sandbags are 50,000 estimate, I really want to see what a medium-term option cost would be if it's similar in style. It just might be a wise investment. That's my,
What's the, anything else, Barney?
no.
Terry, you here?
I'm here. Just it's sort of hard to without the visuals and the graphics, but I have no questions.
Okay, I have a couple. With regard to the existing improvements, the Chase Lounge and that deck area, what would it cost to remove that area?
We don't have a price at this time, but the thought would be that if we were to put in the medium-term option or the long-term option, that it would be removed as part of it.
Okay, so is there anything that is imminently dangerous or hazardous with regard to those improvements? Well, they may be removed anyways, that's what we're hearing. So even if they got damaged in the near term, would we be thinking of replacing them?
So yeah, we're not concerned about damage, and then we talked about possibly removing them and try to relocate the Chase Lounge to another area. But no, we would not be putting it back. We don't think.
I mean, just from a visual perspective, they look vulnerable. They're being open like that and exposed. But if they're possibly scheduled to be removed anyway, that even if they are further damaged, I don't see the negatives unless I'm missing something.
No, I would agree with you. I think that's correct. I would actually want to add one other item about the short-term option I failed to mention is, so it would be these trap bags, which are heavy textile material, but they could be cut. They're not meant to be permanent. And in further discussions with Smith Group on this, while they certainly could provide some reduction in erosion under that bench area over the winter, there's certainly the potential that they could be undermined in that area, or more likely could be punctured by ice, depending on the winter weather. So while we think they would be beneficial, they certainly don't come without risks.
So what would be the benefit then for having them? What will we be accomplishing?
Well, they would provide a barrier between the sand behind in front of the parking lot and the lake, which would help to reduce some of the erosion.
So would the goal then would be are we looking to protect the sand that is directly east of the parking lot? Or are we looking to protect the parking lot?
We're simply looking to protect the parking lot. I'm only talking about the material that's still there in front of the lot. So the idea would be if it was felt that the parking lot was at risk to the point that if we didn't do anything prior to, let's say, next spring, if we did option 3, then this would be a kind of an intermediate, a temporary protection.
So what's the risk to the parking lot?
At this point, we don't feel there is an immediate risk to the parking lot, but the idea would be that there is no, as I think you understand, there is no sheet pile wall protecting the lot. So in the unlikely situation that the lake levels rose to the point that the water could actually wash out to the edge of the parking lot, eventually it could undermine that parking lot. But once again, that would be had to be the right circumstances for that.
So you said eventually, so this sounds like there need to be repeated events for it to be undermining the parking lot, that even if there's like a one-time event, the parking lot should be fine?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the lake levels, the forecast on the lake levels. I think when we originally talked about this, we were thinking, the lake levels could very well go up. We simply don't know, but we saw what it did in front of the Interpretive Center building. We just wouldn't want it to reach the parking lot, which is why we were exploring this revetment option for long.
And is Margaret, we haven't talked to her in a month or so, is the lake levels continue to recede?
She's staying optimistic and telling us long-term she thinks they're receding.
Okay, that's the parking lot. And what we're hearing is that the existing sheet pile for the Interpretive Center is sufficient to protect that location, correct also?
We feel it is. It is the plans that Smith Group are putting together for revetment in the Interpretive Cove also includes additional rock that would go in front of that sheet pile in front of the Interpretive Center building.
Is there any concern of potential topping above the sheet metal revetment that's currently there, that would damage the Interpretive Center?
We didn't experience any. We certainly had the situation where that a good portion of that sheet pile wall in front of the building had been exposed, and we did not experience any water entering. But yeah, if it were to be topped, it's a few feet before the building, but we did not have any of that, fortunately.
Is there any plans for if in case of an emergency situation, we have an Edmund Fitzgerald type of northeaster that we get forecast, and is there anything that we can do on a emergency basis to potentially protect the areas that are vulnerable? Like really, like if we got 4 days notice, Tom Skilling says, there's going to be an Edmund Fitzgerald northeaster coming in 4 days. What would our plan be?
Well, if you're referring to, let's say, the water getting into the building, I mean, we could potentially obtain sandbags and put those around the entrances. I would say the only area we've had overtopping on the boardwalk was in the swimming cove. But the good news is that we have not had any water in that building. And the only door to that building is actually on the west side of the building as well.
So sounds like that if we had one of those Edmund Fitzgerald northeasters, that whether we have topping or not have topping, it sounds like the buildings are secured and they're not in imminent danger.
We feel that they are correct, but as I said, we could bring in sandbags for the Interpretive Center building around the entrances if we felt necessary.
Okay.
Well, I think, Cal, you're hitting on the right question, but sometimes a storm comes up overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And my concern would be you hear about it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you're not going to have time to get sandbags at the Interpretive Center. And remember, almost half of the wall facing the lake is a door.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we get the adverse conditions, well, I'm urging that perhaps we should have a contingency plan and start sandbagging it in anticipation versus waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and going, hot damn, I better get down to it, a shovel and start filling sandbags. We're not going to have time to do it.
Because, obviously, now that we've been educated on this, Margaret, October and November are the bad months where you get those. We're getting more northeasters than we used to, obviously, but traditionally October and November were the months that really we had to be concerned about those. I think now it's bled into the spring. We also get those now in the spring, which they were historically were not done. So I just want to make sure that we have some type of contingency plan in place that whether we have notice or we don't have notice during the time of year where there's the likelihood of those type of events that we're proactive. Because I know the little I know is that once winter comes and there's some ice freezes, then the threat recedes because you don't have to worry about the topping because there's frozen ice right there. And so therefore it kind of protects the improvements, but until the ice freezes, it's exposed.
And last year, we did not have extensive ice in the lake.
Yeah, so I mean, Jeff, are we on, are we correct? I mean, that's, are our assumptions correct?
Yeah, I mean, but once again, I will say that this is something we've talked quite a bit about with Smith Group and staff has been monitoring. And at this point, they feel that there isn't an imminent threat and that we would expect to make it okay through the fall and
Okay.
winter season.
But
Now,
that's
once
take-
again,
but
we're
that's-
looking at a long
But that's
term.
not, I don't think that's addressing Cal's point about the overtopping. You know, the sand will be there and protect, and may wash away, but. if
Right,
we
the
get
only
the-
overtopping we've experienced so far significant was in the swimming cove. We
Right.
haven't experienced any water going in that building. And once again, like you said, the entrances to the interpreter center are different. They're on the front of the building.
So I
Fortunately, the
think,
Swimming cove, they're in the back of the building.
operationally, what we can do is we can just plan ahead and have those sandbags ready to go for the interpretive cove in the building for sure. And
No,
then-
yeah, it sounds like we don't really need to, we're not talking about the extent of trap bag type of thing.
right.
This is more like, you see in the spring and in the Mississippi where you see these guys getting out there and putting sandbags. I don't know if this is the right answer or if Stephen Ness or this is overkill, but I just rather have a contingency plan, especially if we have notice that this is going to be a bad storm. I mean, if the one that Barney's scenario, I mean, there's only so much we can do, and so much planning we can do. But if we do have notice that there's going to be a terrible storm and we don't have a contingency plan how to deal with it, I think that it allows for easily second guessing that we're not being proactive.
And look,
Yes.
once the sandbags are put along that eastern face, you're not going to take them away 2 days after the storm. They're going to be there through the rest of the season. And so that's the operational plan, I think, that we're getting to. And I personally would be in favor of being overly protective, which doesn't necessarily have a significantly enormous cost to us. So that's my view on this aspect. But while we're on this slide, and the comment that was made before, and Cal brought it up, I think we should remove the chaise lounge and the overhang now, because among other things, it's an eyesore, but also people look and they say, we're not taking care of our property. And we also know that if a storm comes in and it gets under it, it's going to lift it up and rip it out. So why wouldn't we take it out?
So Jeff, I don't know if you want to comment. The only thing that we'll have to address are the pilings. If we do take it out, that would be part, and that's a pretty significant, because they'll be exposed unless we just fence off the area.
Yeah,
so
fence
we
it,
could,
fence it up, but not with this kind of fence. This looks like we didn't know what we're doing.
well, no matter what fence we put there, if the lake's going to get that high, the lake's just going to take it with it.
Yeah, I know, but we could do
Yeah.
better.
So
Yeah, I mean,
we can
Originally,
certainly-
sorry, Brian.
it's okay. Go ahead.
Originally, the thought would be to take it out when we're putting in the revetment, because it's obviously an economy of scale. They'll be on site. They'll be removing some of that boardwalk temporarily as well and excavating. But it's certainly something we can look into, the timeline and what it would take to get it out now.
Yeah, I think that if we really break this into two different issues, there's protecting the infrastructure, the improvements from the waves, and then there's the second, which is I don't want to minimize it, but it's the lesser of the two, is to address potential topping. So addressing to break them into pieces with regard to the first issue, it appears based on the Smiths Group's conclusion is that due to our replenishment, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, due to our replenishment, that we have sufficient sand there to protect our improvements, period. And then nothing further needs to be done, at least at this time, with regard at these lake levels. Now, if lake levels go up, then there may be additional issues with regard to the parking lot. But it appears that the interpretive center and the swimming cove, the buildings, the improvements should be, I mean, obviously there's no for sure's in life, but should be protected just based on the replenishment that we did.
Yes, that's correct. Now, we've really spoken to them a lot about as you said, the fall and winter months. And so basically the statement you just made, I see is accurate through fall and winter. We'll certainly reassess in the spring, and we still have the likely plan that we'd be recommending a revetment for long-term protection in the spring.
So then the second issue, which I don't mean to minimize it, but it's not as imminent, is with regard to the topping, because it sounds like that's more of a nuisance issue, because that's going to be a cleanup issue. That the topping is not going to endanger the structures. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, that would be correct.
So really the issue with the topping is more for cleanup purposes and for example, getting water in the building, potentially getting water in the building or whatever, or damaging somehow damaging the boardwalk or something like that. But that is not going to immediately create a situation where the buildings will not be structurally sound.
I agree with that.
Okay. Barney, you okay? Do you understand?
Yeah.
So it sounds like that we're okay for this season. Sounds like we're okay for the winter season. But with regard to the topping is whether we want to be proactive regarding the nuisance of cleanup that may have to be done if the water tops over the existing retaining wall or revetment and actually enters the building and has to be cleaned up.
If water comes in during the winter and freezes, you've got a much different problem. So that's why I'm pushing to get the sandbags in place.
Okay, so when this is presented to the board, I would suggest you break it into the two different pieces we just talked about. One is about the structural integrity of the improvements, and then the other is with regards. It's more of an operational issue with regard to the topping and potential. But that doesn't sound as that would create structural structural damage. It's more of a operational of cleanup at that point.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
Okay.
Can I step in for a minute?
Step in for 2 minutes.
Okay. So I have been listening. I know that for me, it's more of an aesthetics at this point. I know, Barney, you mentioned, pulling out the shade lounge, which would expose the things around it, then putting a fence around it, but the fence doesn't look good. I don't see the pictures. So the question is, what do we feel about like having sandbags laying around too, right? I mean, isn't that an aesthetic that we have to think about as well, or no?
Well, if you've got a storm surge, you're not going to worry about the aesthetics of the sandbags.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're worried about like the fence and what it looks like now, forget the storm. Are we worried about what sandbags look like, even though there's no storm? I guess that's all I'm saying.
Well, you can't see the picture, so so the fence is, and especially when you're down there, you've seen it. It's pretty bad, but maybe all we can do right now. No, I'm not worried about the sandbags because if we're in the winter situation and we're using the building at all, people come in from the south anyhow, and the sandbags only go up a foot. I don't know exactly how high they place them. That's up to Jeff, but I don't think that's going to be a major issue because those doors wouldn't be open.
Okay.
Where are you, by the way?
I'm in Vernon Hills, but I'm heading homeward.
Okay, this is better than any podcast that you can listen to in your car. So
Yeah, seriously.
okay, so anything else is there anything else, Jeff?
Nothing else with Rosewood, no.
Okay, anything else? Staff, anything they want to throw in there? Are we pretty much done swimming down there? Is the water cold enough that people aren't going to go in?
We have swimming for, I think, 2 more weekends.
Is is anybody going in the water?
That I don't know.
Yeah, there wasn't people in there today because of the waves, but yeah, we're you know on typical days we are still experiencing swimmers. Last weekend was obviously a pretty rough weekend. We didn't have a lot of attendance, but it's supposed to be kind of a cool weekend this weekend, but warm back up all next week and through next weekend. It's supposed to be in the 70s and 80s. So our final weekend will probably be somewhat busy.
Okay, great. Okay, anything else on Rosewood Beach projects? Hearing nothing. Let's go to the next item on the agenda is the draft of the 5-year capital plan, Director Smith. It seems like what Yogi Berra would say, it's deja vu all over again. Did we just talk about this?
Well,
You guys don't know who Yogi Berra is. Do you have anybody? Are you guys?
of course.
You guys know, Mary Lynn, do you know who the Yogi Berra is?
I do in Boo Boo too.
Okay. Okay,
Oh,
go
my.
ahead. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Yes, you are correct. We did discuss the 5-year capital plan in depth last week. The focus last week was really on 2021. And so we wanted an opportunity to come back and once again, give an opportunity for the board to comment on any 22 to 25 items. Before we jump into the plan, I do want to address the green print. So I'm going to share my screen here again. And this is a schedule showing all of the green print projects. The far right shows the dollar amount associated with that project that is in this 5-year capital plan. And then the center here gives a very, very high level idea of our projected schedule for each of these projects. So I know it's kind of a lot to take in, so I'm going to give you a moment to take a look and then answer any questions you may have right now.
Is there any easy way to share can you just give me in bite-sized information which of the projects are paid for?
So I'll quickly go through the projects listed here. The preserve, it's fully budgeted for. The next is the Sunset Woods Playground and master plan. And once again, what we're estimating for the playground construction is in here as well. So the full project is in the budget. Next is the Centennial.
Wait, Jeff, for 2021. For Sunset Woods, it's fully completed according to this in 2021, Terry.
Yeah, I know about that. Okay, thank you.
The next item in here is the Centennial Ice Arena, and next year we have the planning for the project. We made a little adjustment in the budget based on the feedback from last week. We have money in the budget for planning next year and then construction in 2022, and that full project is in the budget. There's also dollars for, it's listed as Centennial Ice Arena, but we're not sure where it would be. It would be gymnastic improvements. Those are listed in 2024. And now we get to a project I think you were kind of asking about, the multi-purpose facility, our West Ridge Center planning. We have $50,000 budgeted next year, 2021, for planning. But the next steps and the additional funding will be based on what we find next year through that process. So the capital plan does not include specifics beyond that, except the next item is West Ridge Center building repairs. So we have a number of repairs listed in this building from 2022 to 2025, and they go to $3.2 million. And most of those are items that would not be done on the building if the building were, let's say, not inhabited anymore, or we were to renovate in some way. And then lastly, we've listed the athletic field synthetic turf in here. There is not money budgeted for this one. However, we do plan to have some planning efforts, internal planning efforts later next year on this.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
And in this, I guess I want to ask a question. I do want to ask a question. Centennial Ice Arena planning is next year. What is the thinking about planning component for the planning regarding the gymnastics part of Centennial? Is the staff thinking that Centennial will continue to be home to gymnastics, or is it part of the grander scheme perhaps for Westridge?
So Centennial per this plan we're looking at, Centennial will continue to be part of, gymnastics will continue to be part of Centennial up until 2024, where based on our understandings of our needs, it would most likely be relocated somewhere.
Anything else, Barney?
No, I'm just trying to get the thought process. And I guess let me ask you a question about gymnastics. Is it the consensus of staff and planning that gymnastics should be removed from Centennial?
So, Barney, sorry, I was speaking before and I was muted. Part of where it says multi-purpose facility planning, which is going to begin in Q4 this year and go through next year, is to assess gymnastics. That's part of that assessment. So the idea is to determine if there's, as part of that process, if there is a better location for gymnastics. If it's determined that there is a better location, then that would be pursued after that process, which is why it's kind of pushed back to 2024. The Centennial Ice renovations are planned to go forward without gymnastics taking place, knowing that it can happen at a later point at Centennial or somewhere else. Does that?
That's getting close, but if in 2021 the determination is that gymnastics could stay at Centennial, should stay at Centennial, I'm not sure what the words are yet, then in my opinion, if you're going, we should do the gymnastics at Centennial when we do Centennial. And I know that's moving up 2 years, about $1 million into 2022. I think we need to really understand where gymnastics should go. And that's all part of your 2021 planning.
Yeah.
I will, can I add to that, Brian?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, as part of this planning and the scope for the Centennial renovation, and I don't want to speak for other staff, but I know we've looked at that, and I think the consensus for the most part right now was that in order to have a certain size facility, which would be a true benefit to the program, that building simply won't meet those requirements. And that's part of the reason why it shows gymnastics out in the future, possibly explore a relocation, because there are simply limitations in the Centennial Ice Arena building.
Okay, see, and that's what I've heard all along, and it's always been my belief after talking to the staff over the years that it's maybe more complementary to the little kids programs that we would have at Westridge. And I'm not saying that as conclusive. So I'm just trying to, to say next year, we make the decision, but if the decision is to move gymnastics, are we going to plan for the reuse of that area when we do the planning for Centennial next year? So I don't want us to come back in 3 years and say, yeah, now we're going to look at gymnastics, the studio rink and what we should do with it. Where I want to have that all planned out and, if necessary, budgeted when we do the budget for Centennial.
So this was how when we did the green print refresh process, this was through all the discussions and the research and the planning that the board liaisons and staff did. This was the conclusion that was presented to the board that intentionally said, let's move forward with Centennial with not doing the gymnastics at this point, leaving it as it is, because the dollars to be spent at Centennial would not be worth the investment. The return on that investment may not be worthwhile.
I
So-
understand that, Brian, but
Yeah.
my planning point is, in 2021, we need a determination of what's going to happen with gymnastics.
Hold on a second.
And it should be planned out to what will happen when we move gymnastics out of Centennial to the gymnastics area, so that we don't have to come back and start replanning that area. I'm just saying, we should have a comprehensive plan for Centennial with that as the target.
Okay.
All right, any other questions about the schedule?
Okay, is there anything else on this? Hello, Gary?
No,
Okay, is there another slide?
Yes, I'm gonna change my screen out here again. All right, can everybody see the Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah, we
Yes.
do. Yeah.
All right. So this is, once again, I'm sure you recognize this document, our 5-year draft capital plan. And the plan is not to go through every item here. It's really just to focus on 2022 to 25, which, while we touched on some of those items last week, I wasn't able to provide a lot of opportunity for a lot of questions. So we'll go through the plan and answer any questions about those items. There were a few updates I made to the plan based on the feedback last week, which I will point out as we go along as well. Before we get into the plan, though, I do want to talk about this first section here, starting at line 10. This is a summary of the total. So basically, this is the total brought up to the top. And just once again, a reminder, the green color here are tier 1, 2, and 3 items, kind of our necessary items and our replacements. And then the yellow are tier 4 and 5, which are generally the improvement items. So you'll
Jeff?
see here.
Jeff,
Yes.
before we continue, could you just tell us what's the goal of this exercise?
This goal of this exercise is to, once again, go through the plan, but give the board the opportunity to ask specific questions about anything in 22 to 2025. Because last time our focus was strictly on 21, and we pretty much skipped over most of those other items.
And so then after that, what's our goal?
Well, after that, if there's any requested changes, we'll make those. And then at a future date, sometime in October, we'll be bringing the full plan to the full board.
Are you looking for a plan to be, a 5-year capital plan to be recommended by the finance committee? Or is this, we're just helping home the plan and then the staff will then present it to the board?
So yeah, I think we definitely want a consensus from the finance committee that based on staff's recommendation for the 5-year capital plan, the finance committee would recommend the approval of such. This doesn't get necessarily approved like the 2021 budget does, the capital budget, but it is placed into our budget document. It's really just a plan, so it doesn't.
So my suggestion then is that then when we bring this to the board, we're asking the board for consensus that this is the 5-year capital plan and that it can be included into the budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what's the timetable that you're looking from both the finance committee and the board to do just that?
So the plan is to present this at the October 12th, I believe it is, our first workshop in October. But it won't go into the budget until we seek approval for the budget, which based on our new calendar is not until January.
Okay. So then is there any reason why we're trying to get this done in October?
What's wrong?
I'm sorry?
I don't know what that was, but there's not necessarily a rush other than we're just, this is the way we built it into our schedule. So if we delay it, it'll just kind of, we'll have to move other things around. So it's not, it's not a,
Here's my suggestion, is because obviously in a normal year, then, this timetable, it works fine. But obviously we're not in any normal situation with COVID, is that let's go through it like we planned. Let's present this to the board. We can even do a recommendation, but let's just do this as an interim plan, because things could change in the next 2 months too, based on what happens with COVID. So I think if we just address this as the interim 5-year plan, obviously, because it may change between now and the time that the budget is prepared. Or it's
correct.
submitted.
Yeah.
Okay, just make sure that's clarified.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, sorry to interrupt, Jeff.
No, thank you. So I just wanted to provide a really quick summary, starting here with 2021. You'll see that we currently have budgeted $6.1 million in tier 1 to 3 projects and $447,000 in tier 4 to 5. And then that's a total of $6,600,000. I won't go through the rest of the numbers, but I will give you an opportunity to look at the future years here as well to see the breakout.
Okay, seems like 2024 is the expensive year. Oh, I should do that. 2022 is also. Okay. All right, let's
All
go.
right.
Let's go. Batter up.
So as usual, I'm just going to kind of go through this relatively quickly. Please stop me if you have any specific questions on any specific items. So the district-wide here, we talked about most of this last week. Any item for most of these in 2021 is similar in 22 and on. As you'll see here with district-wide planning, this is something we put a placeholder in and it gets carried down often. In 2022, the number's a little higher there because we're looking most likely to update our district-wide master plan, and that's where additional dollars are there. There aren't.
Is somebody going to explain?
Has there any thought been given to, depending on who you listen to, what expert, that the vaccine for COVID may be in the second or third quarter of 2021, if that's true? Is there any thought given to basically rebooting Greenprint or any other plans that we may have after we kind of figure out where the district is at that situation, at that place in time?
That's essentially what 2022 is. So 2021 next year will continue, as we already did the refresh. So
Yeah.
2022 is sort of now let's take a new approach. So we recently did a community-wide attitude and interest survey. So we have that data, and that was just done a year ago. In 2021, I don't want to get into too much detail today, but we plan on doing site plans for all of our parks. And then
internally, right?
internally.
Yeah.
And then in 2022 would be a good opportunity to take now a 10-year look at a new 10-year plan, since Greenprint 2020 is technically through 2020, 2021, and it'll be the right time to readdress that.
So
Does
I
that
think that
answer-
if you put it as a line item basically for 2022, if you like almost like Greenprint 3.0, because we've already done through 1.0 and 2.0. If you label it as Greenprint 3.0, then we have like a benchmark. Then in 2022, we're going to revisit our Greenprint plan.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
sounds good.
Will I
Any other
still be on the
questions?
board? Will I still be on the board?
What's that?
Will I still be on the board for that?
Yes.
You're going to be on the board
Yes.
forever, so why don't you stop asking that question?
It's fine. All right, next.
All right, I'm going to move down then to the technology. Once again, this is identical to what we talked about last week. no
Well,
question.
and technology, what does it mean to say, and I really don't know what it means, infrastructure replacement, and I'm looking out to 2025, 300,000, but 80,000. Is that just saying technology is going to be so different that we'll have to replace what we have? Explain that to me, please.
Sure, it's actually very specific items, just not detailed in here. It's essentially the behind the scenes, the network, the hardware that has to be replaced. Certain things have obviously, like just like our equipment's right below it, have certain life expectancies or expire at a certain point. So those are planned out, specific items. Does that answer your question?
Well, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily going to have to spend the money. It depends on the condition of if we're still up and running and there's no major problems, doesn't it?
Well, yes, we certainly reassess all of these, and we certainly do what we can to save funds and not replace things if we don't have to. But right now, this is what we're anticipating. Well, like for example, in 2025, that we would specifically need to replace. I apologize, I don't have the specific list in front of me.
No, that's okay. But I'm just going back to the last conversation where we had, we had a dump truck and we were able to get another 2 years out of it. And now we're going to replace it because it's on here. It has been well beyond its useful life, but I don't know whether the technology is like, if I use an iPhone 6, I can use that for 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. And I wouldn't want to spend money just to upgrade to say, hey, we just upgraded. That's all I'm just getting to. We'll have to.
Completely understood.
Somebody will have to explain it to us people who don't know how to use a computer the right way.
Completely understood. And I know you can't see it in these numbers, but it was similar in 2021. There were other items we were considering replacing, but then we were able to make some adjustments and we were able to reduce that amount.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is always reassessed.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions about the park equipment replacements? I'm going to scroll through this slowly because I know there's a lot of them.
No, my only constant comment is we're going to be seeing a lot of new electric trucks, electric vehicles coming down. None of this takes into account, I mean, we don't know anything about that or how it's going to impact the costs. But is it within our is it within our environmental policy that we should be looking into and constantly evaluating the electric vehicles?
It's certainly something that staff does. There are, from time to time, there's limitation, I will say, in availability or in simply the type of vehicles we utilize and what's available. But staff have been looking into this and actually talking to the city as well, because I know they've been doing some electric vehicles or even hybrid vehicles as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I've seen their little cars driving around the place. And wouldn't you like to have one of those new Tesla trucks? Yeah. I'm just throwing it into the equation that we're at some point going to have to take a more serious look at the alternative fuel vehicles. That's my toss out. That's all.
So then I'll start here with the parks, with Brown Park. I will try to say this once and not repeat it every time, and that is, you'll see there's a tennis court patch, color and stripe. This is our replacement or repairs scheduled for courts, and you'll see some asphalt in here as well. You'll see that throughout all of the parks. That's based on a schedule where we regularly reassess and then adjust those years as needed. So I'm just going to keep going through here. Any questions about Danny Kniff Park?
I don't know. Arnie, Terry? I know, Terry, it's hard for you to do this when you're not looking at this, but
Yeah, what does it say about Kniff?
it says a lot.
Oh, all right. All right, well, if you don't have any questions, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Well, for example, Terry, in this is something you'll appreciate, I am sure. 2023, it's a tier 5, meaning it'd be nice if we did it, is lights on field number 2 for $150,000. And it's going to depend on, I would assume, utilization and demand.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, moving on. I'll stop at Fink Park, see if there's any specific questions.
And we've got replacement of tennis, grinding of tennis courts. We've got $700,000 in 2025 for playground equipment. And that's, 5 years out. It's by then, I assume it's going to be what, 10, 15 years old?
Actually, Dan Voss would be able to speak to the year on that. Dan, you there?
Yeah, actually, I can't speak specifically, but it's more than that. It's closer to about, hot lot, it would be close to about over 20. It'd definitely be over 20. And the elementary structure would probably be about 18 at that point, 18 or 19. But I have to find out for sure. I don't have it in front of me.
What is our expected life for playground equipment?
We've increased it significantly. A lot of that is due to the fact that we no longer have playgrounds that are completely made out of wooden posts.
Yeah.
So about 10 years ago, the life expectancy was our average life was between 14 to 16. But now working with Jeff through this, we're up to between, the shortest would be 19, but some have as long as 22.
Wow. So that we don't have to necessarily think about moving up that date from 2025 is what I was getting to.
No, there's
We're
nothing.
confident with that date.
Yeah.
Okay, but what is fitness station? Is that something that's widely used? I mean, again, it's a 2025 item for $125,000 for a fitness station renovation at Fink, and I just ask, is it's being used?
Is that the stuff that's around the path?
Yes. Dan Voss, you can comment on that a little bit. I think
Well, I can comment on the usage, but I believe this is also in there. It does get used by a few people, not very many, no, but I believe the rec department was looking for almost one of those outdoor fitness, not just a single station, but a bigger multiple areas where you have like 12 or 14 stations at one single point.
Something to explore in 2025.
Right.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to move down then. Lincoln Park. Moraine, specifically, we talked about line 115 here with the ravine restoration. We talked about this last week about moving the money for the Army Corps project to 2023 and reassessing at that time.
Where did we go back to, where were we?
Yeah, go back.
Yeah, where were we with the retaining wall beach walk construction? I see you have a placeholder for 450 for 2021. Where are we with that?
Yeah, so it was discussed last week that was a possibility that we could move the planning to 2021 and the construction to 2022. But my recollection was that in the end, it was left that we would be bringing it to the full board at a later date to address that and make a determination as to when and if it all be done.
Okay, so that just make sure you remind us or highlight that this is something that we discussed, whether this or any other projects that, I don't remember off the top of my head that we have especially for 2021, that when you present this to the board, that you highlight that and that we encourage board discussion with regards to that item.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a follow up on what Cal just said. I want to make sure that it's not something that we overlook, put it in the budget, and then have people come back and say it's in your budget. Why aren't you spending the money? I think, so far, I think the consensus is that we may be deferring that past 2021. But as you said, we should talk about it at the appropriate board meeting.
Yeah, that's correct. Like I said, the notes from last week were to possibly move it, but in the end, I think wait for full board consensus before we made a final determination.
You might want to.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you might want to mark that like in red or something so that, it stands out as otherwise people gloss over and then we'll have to keep it.
Well, it
Good.
certainly will be an item that will be
Yeah.
pointed out when we bring this to the full board.
Yeah, I think my recollections, we have that, the revetment issue at Rosewood, and if there's
Mhm.
anything, there's some gymnastics, those are the items I think that we'd like to have a robust discussion at the board level.
Yeah, so just to kind of expand on that, when we present this entire 5-year capital plan to the board, we were considering a little bit of a different approach, definitely different than how we're doing it with the finance committee, in that we would present it a few slides on that would sort of summarize some of the key highlights in the plan. We would, of course, distribute the plan in advance in hopes that people looked at it. We would go through those key highlighted areas that the finance committee would like to highlight and discuss. And then, we would go through it in a much quicker process than we are now at that board meeting. So we have one more finance committee meeting where we have identified the opportunity to go over how we will address this with the board. And then that October date is when we plan to present it.
Okay, but I think from the conversation so far, you're getting the feel for the topics that really need the board to discuss. And this is
Yeah.
obviously one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's why I said mark it in red. Okay.
Okay, let's keep on going.
All right.
What time is it? Who's playing tonight on the NFL? Does anybody know who's playing football tonight? I gotta figure out what I'm doing tonight.
Sorry, Cal, we can't
The
help.
Browns and the Bengals.
The Browns and the Eagles? Okay.
Bengals.
The Eagles?
Bengals.
Keep scrolling through the plan here.
All right, let's stop at Deutsche Park.
Wait, one more thing. Did the Eagles lose to the Giants last week?
Bengals.
The
Bengals.
Bengals.
Oh,
Bengals.
Bengals. Oh, okay. Okay.
So thank you. We're at Deutsche Park.
Yeah, we touched on this briefly last week, and I know we shared the agreement for this site. And so any comments or questions about this?
I will mention that I talked to Brian Romes about this. The agreement's expired. It's expiring, and it provides that the homeowners can terminate it at any time after this. And I'm not inclined to spend the money for the park unless we have a new agreement that basically lets us control the property in perpetuity. But the other issue is, is it worth spending $300,000 for a park located where it is? And I'm a strong advocate, as some know, for having the little, I'll call them pocket parks, little small parks all over. I'm going to say this was fortuitously given to us, but I don't know if we should continue it.
Let me make the suggestion. I'm gonna actually go by the park. It's been a long time since I've been over there. So I think maybe before we bring this back to the board or it's back to the finance committee, that I recommend that we all go drive by it and just take a look at it and see what we're talking about. And then we can talk about it we can have a more fuller discussion at that point.
As you would say, a robust discussion.
I was going to say, but I already said robust once. I don't want to use it again. My dad always said, if you use the word once, you should not continue to use it. So.
Okay, but in any case, the agreement's expired and we can't live without having a new agreement.
Yes.
Yeah. So per Barney's comments and our discussion, I'm going to also reach out to the association and see if I can make contact and just kind of address the fact that the agreement is expiring and we'd like to talk about the future.
Fair enough.
All right.
As I just said the last meeting, or every time this comes up, I'm friends with the Deutsch family. So, I don't think that clouds my, decision making, but I just want to make sure that that's of record.
All right. And then any questions about Rosewood Beach? As was just mentioned, we'll be talking about these two items in 2021 at a future board meeting. You'll also see in 22 and 24, we've budgeted here for potential beach nourishment.
You know, the frustrating part about Rosewood Beach, and I've said this in the past, is that when we approved it, I swear I recommend several times, the consultants were adamant that following the model of Lake Forest, that Lake Forest did not need any, has not had or needed any beach replenishment, and it seems like, you know, we keep spending money down there. It's frustrating. Okay.
So we will probably refine these numbers a little bit after next Tuesday's discussion, if we are able to come to some conclusions regarding the boardwalk repairs and the revetment. But per your comment earlier, Cal, we do have time to revise these numbers before it goes into the final budget. So
Okay, fair enough.
So I'm just going to quickly move through here. Any questions about Sunset Woods?
No. It's in good hands, and Terry and Lori's hands, so I'm confident that they'll come up with a nice plan.
We got the whole world in our hands.
You know. I'm sure there's a robust discussion going on there.
Full-bodied
Yeah.
discussion.
Okay, let's keep going.
We've touched on the preserve, so I didn't have anything to add there.
So let's talk about West Ridge. So we're basically, from what my understanding is that we're going to be talking about West Ridge in 2021. Is that correct?
well, what you're looking at right now is West Ridge Park, but yeah, the building we will start talking about in the November, actually, is what our plan is, and then into 2021. Yes.
And so what's the plan for that? I mean, we going to set up another committee, or what are we planning on doing with regard to West Ridge?
Yes, we will re-engage and have some staff, some board liaisons work with staff. We will look at, we will start doing some stakeholder engagement, which will include reaching out to School District 112 and possibly School District 113, the city, just to kind of explore if there are any partnership or funding opportunities. And then we, of course, will do retake a look at our green print process, and because we did some assessments already based on program needs. And of course, we looked at our engineering assessment. So really, we're just going to re-engage in that process. And that'll be, you know, quite an extensive amount of work, I think, to look at that. So we have a detailed plan put together that we can go over at the next finance committee if you'd like.
Yes, I'd like to see the plan.
The
Okay.
detailed plan for what?
The plan West Ridge.
No,
Yeah,
no, no. Is it a plan of how to plan?
Yes, it's yes, essentially. It's
I'd like to see it.
it's
Yeah, I think we should see that, please.
okay. Yeah,
And-
absolutely.
Do we take into is there anything in the plan that would allow any intersection with the nursery school that's on the school site there?
Yeah, I mean, part of the process would be reaching out to any interested stakeholder that would be affected by whether it be a renovation, an expansion, or a rebuild. So we certainly they would be part of it at some point.
What's the status of the nursery school parcel? I'm talking about directly west. It looks like it's overgrown. Is that purposely overgrown, or what's going on over there?
I think Dan, so you're talking about the landscaping?
Yeah, I'm talking about west of the you know, between Red Oak Lane, I think that's what it's called, and the nursery school. It seems like everything is overgrown. It looks. I don't know if that's intentional or what's happening there.
Yeah, we're in conversations with the nursery school right now about that, and I know Dan's had some specific conversations about that. I don't think they ever really fully completed their landscaping plan, so we're just kind of having conversations with them about what maintenance we need to do and what their plan is. So I don't know, Dan, if there's any more that you can add to that.
No, that's correct. I did talk to him, believe it was just last week, about a different topic. And they asked if we could, they mentioned the agreement that we have with the school district to maintain the property. And I said, yes, we have our job is to mow turf, and which there isn't any. But I did tell them that we would send somebody out in a mower to cut down some of those big weeds that have been growing. And then I asked them what their further plan was, and they said that they are supposed to be working with, they hope to be working back with their contractor to reseed and to finish up, because clearly whatever I don't know if they just didn't finish last year or their seed just didn't take, but clearly it's not turf that is
I
maintained.
know if that was a private piece of property, I know the city would have already ticketed them for not cutting the weeds. And I didn't know, frankly, as I drove by, I wasn't sure if this was intentional to create a natural area or were these weeds. And obviously, excuse me?
I was going to say the basin is supposed to be a natural area, but that's not really growing as they planned as well.
Well, my suggestion is that if there's any area that was, because people are used to looking at turf there, but if there is anything that is intentionally supposed to be a natural area, that there's some signage to reflect that.
Sure.
Because then it goes a long way of people asking questions about it.
And I'm still questioning it, if there's any way that long term we might be able to, I'll keep using the word partner. If we want to partner in some way on the campus that we're going to develop, if we develop at Westridge.
And Dan, and with regard to the area by the batting cage and the ball field by Red Oak, it appears that there's much more screenage there than it used to be. Was that intentional, or are things overgrown?
Hold on. I'm not sure where.
Along the path by the batting cage and Westridge 2, it seems like it's much more overgrown than I can remember, especially when I used to play softball there. And my question is that was that intentional? Was more plantings done there, or is that just grown in?
No, there's no plantings have been done there. And I'm still not, are you talking on the third base side or first base side at Diamond number 2?
Third base side. If you
Third
look
base.
from Red Oak, by Red Oak School, if you look east.
Okay. Yeah, that's mostly just a wooded, and it's mostly just a junk buckthorn area, which we go through and clear that out maybe once every 7-8 years, and the buckthorn grows back. So that hasn't been cleared out in a while, but we can put that on a winter list.
Yeah, I don't know if it was intentional. That's why I was asking the question.
No,
Nothing's
been planted.
Okay, all right. Anything else on these items?
If not, I'm going to move on to facilities. The first one is Centennial. And as we have mentioned earlier, we've adjusted, as of now, our plan has planning in 21 and all construction in 2022 for the renovation.
Is there, while we're on it, the roof replacement you've got scheduled for 2024?
Mm-hmm.
So that's presupposing that it wouldn't be better to do it while we do the massive construction?
Yeah, we see this as a separate project. It's really based on the longevity of the life of the roof. I guess we could certainly look at moving it sooner, but we feel like we're going to get at least 2024 out of it.
Okay.
Deer Racket Club. I will stop at Golf Learning Center.
Before we get to go back to
Sure.
Deer Creek, with regard to the racquetball conversion, so I assume the 40,000 in 2022, is that for planning purposes?
Yeah,
Line 219.
Yes, yes,
design, yeah.
that is correct.
Okay. All right.
In regards to Golf Learning Center, we had some discussions. One was, it was a suggestion, an excellent suggestion for the sign replacement and for the parking lot improvements. We will be splitting that with the city. However, it's possible that it may come in the form of a credit from the city. So we've adjusted this to show the full cost of the project, understanding that in the end, it will still only cost the Park District half of this, but we'll be expending those dollars to do the project.
Is there any line items with regard to the dome?
No. No, not at this point. So that would be part of our pro forma that we're planned to present in December. And we would have a full, because part of our process is to evaluate that building, and then we would put together a 5-year, 5 to 10 year repair replacement schedule if there was anything needed for that. So at this point, we don't have that assessment information, so we won't have that till probably December.
So then if we decide to move forward and acquire the dome, then in next year's 5-year plan, there'll be a line items for the dome at that point.
Likely, yeah.
Okay. Just a lot of ifs, a lot of ifs before we get to that point.
Yep.
I have a question on the sign. Do we have any thoughts as to what it's going to look like yet?
No, the only thing that I think we know is that we plan to use the existing structure, or at least the same location, and the current electricity is already there. So what we've been talking about is that the design elements fit within the design elements of the preserve. So there's a lot of stone, and then that's in the preserve. For example, there's even some in the plans, there's a stone sort of retention wall that's planned to go where a new sidewalk is planned for. So we've just talked more conceptually. We have not gotten into exactly what that would look like.
Okay, are you thinking of having electronic lettering so that we can put messages up? Or are we just talking about a sign that says dome?
So not electronic lettering. At this point, I know that the city has already vocalized that they would not be interested in funding any part of that. And I think I know we looked into this
Zoning.
with IDOT. What's that?
Yeah, we've talked to the city about it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something we'd be allowed to do in that particular location.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it basically says, here be the dome and mini golf or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a lit, sign similar to what it is now, and it would have the name of the facility.
Okay.
It would not be digital. There's no plans for that to be digital.
I do want to point out two items that were discussed last week. One was the rough banks mower and the other was the sprayer. So staff have looked into this. It was a question about whether we needed to replace these or could utilize equipment from another site. The rough banks mower, we're recommending it remain in the plan because it is a piece of equipment during the grass growing season that's used on a daily basis to maintain the driving range and the golf hole that's open there. However, the sprayer is something that staff have looked further into, and we are removing it from the capital plan.
Okay, good. Excellent.
And with Heller Nature Center, there was also a discussion about the HVAC replacement. Staff have looked into this further and feel that with some internal efforts, we could get through a couple more years with the HVAC replacements. We've moved it to 2023, and it would be coupled with a roof replacement. So we'd be minimizing the disturbance kind of all at once.
I want to pause on the roof replacement question. Are we making any progress on getting solar at Deer Creek?
It's funny you ask. I was going to save it for the end of the presentation.
All right, why don't we save it?
Okay.
Because I'd want to do the same thing for Heller. I mean, that's would be such a natural fit.
Yeah.
But we can save it.
All right.
Maybe. Oh, Hidden Creek. Yeah. Concrete surfacing, 95 cents, feature replacement. So there are no dollars at Hidden Creek to pretty it up, or is that not? Or is it just needing, you know, a new coat of lipstick or something? I guess I'd say to make it look more contemporary, should we say?
There are no renovation dollars in here. Primarily, this is maintaining some improvements, but there's a lot in here because there's a lot of maintaining of equipment.
Yeah, that's what I see. Okay.
And the only significant, I think, addition really, which is like a tier 5 project, is well, it says ADA deck, but it's really an expansion of the deck area as well. That would be to accommodate more parties and things of that nature.
And then also, and then line 266 would be another, would certainly be an improvement, would be the splash pad feature.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay.
Any questions about the recreation center?
I have none. Ah, solar panels, look at that. But that's tier 5. Does that mean we have to spend the money for it? On line 297?
Well, we've classified it as a tier 5 because it would be an improvement. It would be something new as an improvement to the space.
So we have flat roof replacement of 450. And you're saying it would cost us another 450 for solar panels?
The amount here is an estimate based on conversations we've had over the last year with some companies. It's not based on a direct quote though, but that's our estimate for installing solar panels on that building, yes.
I thought we had other people do it and that's the end of that's at the end. We're going to talk about that, I guess, huh?
Well, I will address that now is there's a couple of approaches, and for Deer Creek Racquet Club being it would be our first project, we opted to go with this lease agreement where we pay nothing and panels get put on the roof. However, there had been discussion about the other route, which would be to purchase the panels outright. Long term, while there's a significant investment up front, it typically works out in the end. And I know that was kind of aspirational to try that at another site. We've really assessed a lot of sites, and the rec center would be the other best site. So that's why we're putting in the possibility of purchasing panels then the same year we'd be doing the roof.
I understand. Okay. Got it.
And then lastly, Westridge Center, which I believe we've just touched on a little bit ago, unless there's any further questions.
No, we don't spend money if we're going to tear it down is what it keeps coming back to. And that's what we determine next year in 2021. So the 2022 costs are iffy.
Yeah. A lot of that is a placeholder. There is, of course, always the chance that something breaks down before we have a chance to do anything. So we're deferring things as long as we can.
I think we have to be very sensitive about this, especially given the history of 112 with the condition of their schools and the criticism they received for pouring millions of dollars into schools that were earmarked for being torn down or not being used. So, you know, I just think the city, the people that listen to all that stuff and attend board meetings would be sensitive to hearing our plan once it gets out, you know, in that regard.
And I think, Terry,
Yeah.
that goes to, we have to make a decision and we have to come to a conclusion, and that's what 2021 is, as to what is going to be done with Westridge.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you're talking about 8 digits, which as I assume is what we're talking about with that, you know, then, you know, I don't know that much about finances. I'm only a rookie, but I would imagine that we would have to engage in some sort of large scale borrowing or going to the public and asking, and what's the appetite going to be like for that? But that's a question for next year.
All right. Are there any other questions in relation to the capital plan? If not, I'm going to provide a brief update on the solar panels.
None for me.
I got nothing else.
All right. Well, as asked, so staff have been working with Realgy, which is the firm that would be supplying the panels, and also our legal counsel to essentially negotiate our agreement. The roof essentially has been completed, and the next step is just to finalize this agreement. We are, like I said, continuing to negotiate. Once we come to an agreement, we'd be bringing it to the board for approval. I'm particularly mentioning this right now because there is one item that has come up during the negotiations, which we feel that we should run by board members and get some direction and feedback. Now, there's a number of items we have to discuss, and most of them we've come to an agreement on. However, we have one, I guess we could say, a sticking point. And that is, as the board may recall, initially when we made the determination that we were going to move forward with this option, we had to sign a letter of intent with Realgy. And it laid out some very, very basic terms for this. One of which is that the agreement would be a 25-year agreement. However, there was a clause in there that would allow at year 8 for us or Realgy to terminate with an 8-month notice. So we could have the option to actually end it if we decided at that point we didn't want to continue. So as we're working on the actual agreement, Realgy has indicated to us that, oops, they made a mistake and they accidentally signed the wrong letter of intent, and that the earliest termination date is actually 15 years. Now, they spent quite a bit of time explaining to us the reasons why. It has to do with state requirements and their obligations to the state. But nonetheless, it would now commit the Park District to a minimum of 15 years with this, rather than 8 years, which is what staff originally presented to the board. So we're at a point where we're seeking direction as to whether or not this is essentially a deal breaker, or if we should continue with negotiations and bring the full agreement to the board once ready.
What's the, well, a couple things. What's the effect of termination in year 8 versus year 15? What does it do to us?
All right, so basically, so I actually very specifically, I will read from the agreement, from the letter of intent. It says, beginning on the last day of year 8 of the lease, either party may terminate the lease with no less than 8 months written notice of the cancellation date. On termination or expiration of the lease, Realgy will cause all components of the PV plant to be removed from customer property and will repair any damage to the roof or other customer property caused by the installation, maintenance, or removal of the PVC plant. In lieu of the PVC removal, Realgy will offer to sell the PVC plant to the customer for its remaining value. So we have, once again, we just have the option at year 8 to say it's not working out. But with the agreement we're working on, we can't make that decision until year 15.
What's the economic effect on us? Why would we, okay, I hear what you're
I
saying.
don't feel there
but-
necessarily is any. It was more just, we're committed for 15 years, where when we originally brought this to the board, we were committed to a minimum of 8 years. If for some reason there, I honestly, we can't even anticipate what it is, but for some reason we feel that we are not getting a good rate from them, or there's just some issue with the system, and we're not comfortable with the agreement any longer. We
Well,
just have to understand that we're
I
obligated.
have to assume if there's an issue with the system, if it's not performing, that's
That
covered
would
by
be taken
some.
care of, yes.
Yeah,
That would be
but so
taken
what I'm trying to say is, okay, so let's assume that, and again, I don't have the numbers, that it costs us $10,000 a year to use their system. And we could terminate at year 8. But we like the solar system and we go to somebody else, or we buy the equipment and we run it ourselves and we save the whatever, we pay the fair market value, which I assume is defined somehow in the agreement. And so starting in year 8, we would pay them 0. I
We
mean,
would actually pay them nothing for this. We would purchase energy through them in lieu of our current supplier, but we actually don't pay them anything for use of the system.
okay, I understand that, but we're paying them X dollars for energy and versus Y dollars that we would pay to Commonwealth Edison or whomever it is. So in essence, we're paying them some spread. You know, there is some differential that they're getting out of this. So how much are they getting out of this deal for 8 years?
Mary Lynn, you want to answer this one or add anything to this?
I don't have a good answer. I'm going to say it's hard to tell. We would have to go back and look at it. One of the issues is that you have two components. They're making us buy the energy that we're producing. And we have renegotiated this contract with the help of Adam, making them at least stay good there as far as letting us bid out this energy cost with our NIMBIC agreement that we have for all of our other facilities. And then there's still going to be supply charges on top of whichever way we went with Realgy or to our lowest bidder. Boy, we can try and put some sort of a number to that, but I do not have one.
Okay, so here's where I'm trying to understand. For them to have us locked in for 15 years is because they're collecting money from our buying, doing whatever we're doing, however you want to call it. We're paying them something to have this system in place for 15 years versus having it in place for 8 years. What's the additional? And I assume that we're also going to be saving money for the first 8 years or saving money for the total 15 years off what we would pay if we just bought power from Commonwealth Edison or whomever it is, or else it's just not just being, and even though I don't want to focus on just the dollars, but there's money involved for them to make money. I know they get tax credits and stuff. We should be saving money. How much are we saving? How much more is it going to cost us if we stayed with them for 15 years? And if we were able to cancel it at 8 years, does that mean we would then save 7 years of their profit? And what does that come down to? So what's it costing us before we can say, okay, let's go with 15 years?
And Jeff and Mary Lynn, if I could just comment on one thing, I'm not sure it's costing us anything. I think the risk for us is if, say, in 8 years or however many years, we find out that there's just better technology available, we're stuck with them for that amount of time. So, you know, in 8 years, there might just be way better technology that could save us way more money. And now we're missing out on that because we're locked into an agreement for 15 years. I think that's the bigger risk for us. I don't think there's a cost to us except for that.
Well, that's a very good point, but there's got to be a cost to us. You know, again, we pay, you know, X dollars every year for power to run Deer Creek. I have to assume that one of the selling points from them is that we're going to be paying Y dollars to run Deer Creek, which should be less than the X dollars.
Exactly. And for them, it's locking in a 15-year agreement that guarantees them
Y
It-
dollars.
business.
It
Yeah.
has to do with so they have requirements from the state to essentially have these RECs and have these, long story short, to have these solar panels. And he was explaining to us that there's an obligation now that the state has changed its requirements. And so essentially, if we had made an agreement with them and prior to year 15, we stepped out, they would be in default with their requirement through the state for why they're essentially doing this. I certainly assume there's profit related, but I don't think it's really profit driven for them. And as Brian said, I think it's more just the unknown. I mean, our intention would be to stay with them for the full 25 years. We wouldn't recommend this unless we thought that. We just wanted to make it clear that the opportunity to step out has increased dramatically from what we previously presented. All right. If
Yeah,
there's not any other questions. oh,
And
sorry.
again, yeah, Barney, I think, and Cal and Terry, this was the main purpose of bringing this up today was that it's different than what we informed the board of 6 months ago. So we didn't want to bring it to the board with this surprise. It's to say, we just found this information out. If this is a deal breaker, or we think this is a deal breaker, we'll halt negotiations. Otherwise, we'll continue on unless you see there's issue.
What do other companies require?
We don't have anything to compare this to this is the only company we've gone this far with. So I can't say specifically, but from what I'm understanding, anyone else who would be doing a similar situation with this would probably be in the exact same boat with the obligation.
We can
Okay.
call District 112 since they just did a lease agreement for their new building, and we could see what their agreement says.
Oh, we'll find out what kind of deal they got.
Yeah, we could find out.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, is their contract going to be any different than our contract?
Yeah, we're actually meeting with them tomorrow.
Yeah, let's find
So, in fact, I'll just request that, and he sent me all that information. So that should be a pretty quick turnaround answer for you. I can get to that tomorrow or Monday.
I guess the question is, you're right, there could be technological changes. I understand now you can get roof tiles that are solar panels. It's not, necessarily the big clunky things. But if it's a system that will work well for 8 years, all right, we might be on the technological beginning stages. I guess it's like getting an iPhone 1. Probably still works. It probably still works. I don't know that I see it as a breaking point. Cal, Terry?
I'll defer to you.
Yeah, you seem very into this.
Let me tell you, I mean, I think Brian's point is good, is that with other technology changes, I mean, I hate long-term contracts, and so, but I'll defer to staff on this. Staff and Barney, I as the chairman of the plan commission, I appoint you guys the point people on this issue.
Let's just make sure we're consistent with what 112 did, and that they're not trying to pull something over on us.
And I'll also say, if we were to purchase, I mean, we'd be locked in for 20 years anyway, because we would own it and we wouldn't want to throw away that investment.
Of course.
For the most part. So.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this 5-year? My screen's black. I don't know if it's supposed to be, but
mine's blue.
Yeah. So thank you, Director Smith, and thank you for the extensive and robust discussion with regard to the 5-year capital plan. Next item on the agenda is other business. Director Peters.
Okay, so all I have as far as other business are our next two finance committee meeting dates They're in October, October 8th and October 22nd. They're both on a Thursday at 4 p.m. Does that work for everyone?
And What, the 8th and what?
The 22nd.
Yeah, they'll both work for me.
And the 4 o'clock is to accommodate Terry.
Yeah, and I think we need to have Terry.
No, I'm not quarreling with that. It's, I do notice a slackening off of interest as we get closer to 6 o'clock.
All right, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Anything else on other business? Is there anything else that we want to discuss that's not on the agenda? Hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. But before we do this, thank you very much. Again, we've spent a lot of time in the last 2 meetings talking about the capital plan especially. And I appreciate all the hard work and thought that's gone into creating the matrix that we are looking at. And it's always a work in progress. So it's much appreciated. It's very clear. And I appreciate all the effort that went into creating the draft plan. So,
I appreciate that on behalf of everybody else who was involved as well.
okay. So unless anybody else has anything else to say, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
I second. Terry moved. Terry moves. I second.
Barney second. All in favor, say aye. The
Aye.
ayes have it. And this meeting is adjourned at 5:55 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Cal. Good job, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.